Hello everyone, what is up? Welcome back to another episode of Killer Instinct, you guys. Thank you so much for joining me here today. If you're new here, hi, my name is Savannah and I am your host of Killer Instinct. Before we get started, make sure you go ahead and hit that subscribe button. That way you never miss an episode. We post weekly here on the podcast every single Wednesday. We also upload the video version onto YouTube on Wednesdays as well, so make sure you are subscribed. Now, along with that, just as a reminder, if you are looking for more exclusive Killer Instinct content, you can go over and find that on our Patreon, where we upload an additional 3 episodes a month. So instead of getting 4, you will get 7 full Killer Instinct episodes in total from the 4 that you get here a month and the additional 3 over on Patreon. So that link will always be in the description box below for you to check out. Now, as you guys can tell by the title of today's episode, today we are diving into a twisted case. This is one of those cases where the more I was learning about it, the more and more shocked I became. And I am so curious to hear what you guys have to say about this case. I'm so curious to know where you land on it. I'm so curious to know what you believe to have happened in this case and really what the truth is. So with that being said, before I give anything else away, let's jump right on into it. Now, to start off this case, we are going to talk about a woman named Roslin Lewis. Roslin was born on August 31st, 1971 in New Orleans, Louisiana, and she grew up as one of 4 siblings. Roslin had 2 older brothers, and she also had a younger sister named Erica. And according to Erica, she claims that the Lewis family grew up being very tight-knit, and their parents raised all of the children really with an emphasis on just being a good person. They just wanted their children to have good values, good morals, and simply be good people. As far as Roslin's childhood went, Roslin was said to be the type of person who never met a stranger. She would befriend anyone that she met, and she was always very, very chatty. Her energy was known to be very infectious. She could make anyone laugh. She could brighten up a room. And I know it's the cliche that you've probably heard all over social media that people like to say pertaining to true crime. Whenever we're talking about anyone in these sorts of cases, people always joke that the running theme is that they light up a room and they're the best person that anyone else had ever met. And while it may seem stereotypical, the people that were closest to Roslin said just that about her. Now, after graduating from high school, Roslin went on to go to college in New Orleans, and after graduating, she moved on to work in healthcare. And Roslin specifically worked on the billing side of healthcare. She really had a passion for caring for the elderly. She wanted to make sure that the elderly were getting the proper care that they needed and not getting taken advantage of within the healthcare system. So she found a job that allowed her to do just that. Now, pertaining to Roslin's personal life, when Roslin was in her mid-20s, she did something that very much left her family feeling divided, and that was that Roslin began to date women. Now, like I said, this left Roslin's family feeling very conflicted, and while they claim that it never wavered their love for her in any way, the Lewis family grew up being very religious. They were very Christian, and when Roslin came out, it was very much new territory for everyone, and it was something that all of her family members took some time to come to terms with. Some took a little bit longer than others, but again, everyone just wanted Roslin to be genuinely happy, and it seemed like she was. Now, around this time, in the mid-1990s, Roslin decided that it was time for her to make a change in her life. Up until this point, she had been born and raised in New Orleans, and she decided that she wanted to move to a new city. She wanted to have a new chapter, she wanted to have a fresh start, and she actually was able to find a job at a medical call center located in Atlanta, Georgia, so that that is where she decided to move. Now, like I said, because Roslin had only lived in one city her entire life, she was very excited for what this new chapter held and what it meant for her future. And after a few years of being in Atlanta, Roslin met someone who would change the trajectory of her life forever. And that would be a woman named Joyce Pelzer. Now, Joyce and Roslin met while they were both out, and they met through mutual friends, and the two clicked instantaneously. Roslin was attracted to Joyce's spontaneity and her adventurous nature. That was something that was really important for Roslin. She wanted someone who was fun and outgoing, and she definitely felt like Joyce had those qualities. Joyce and Roslin continued dating for several years until they decided to finally get married on the beach in 2016. Now, Roslin's immediate family actually did not attend Roslin's wedding. Roslin marrying a woman was not something that they could fully accept, and they chose to not be there for that. Now, some of Roslin's cousins did go to the wedding, but again, as far as her immediate family, they did not go. It was against their beliefs, and so they excused themselves from it. But regardless, Joyce and Roslin were very excited to embark on this new journey and season of life together. They were optimistic and excited for their future and everything that was going to hold, which is what made what happened next even more shocking. A little over 2 years after Roslin and Joyce got married, on December 10th of 2018, the Conyers, Georgia 911 dispatch center received a phone call from a motel manager claiming that a guest in one of his hotel rooms was screaming for her life, saying, "She's trying to kill me," over and over. Now, the manager was not able to get into the hotel room when he was making the call, but right in the middle of speaking to this 911 dispatcher is when the door to the room opened and a woman fell to the ground halfway out of the door, and that woman was Roslin. Now, when she fell out of the door, Roslin did appear to be in a state of consciousness, and she was able to identify herself, but it was very clear that she had suffered from intense, life-threatening injuries. Now, police and paramedics immediately responded to the scene, and they were horrified at what they saw. The crime scene itself was absolutely brutal. Detectives have said that the hotel room was straight out of a horror movie. There were bloody handprints all over the curtains of the room. There was a trail of blood down the inside of the door, indicating that Roslin had slid down the door at one point during her attack. There was blood on the walls, on the dresser. It was absolutely everywhere, and it was very clear to the paramedics that Roslin had been stabbed multiple times. Roslin did end up going into cardiac arrest while the first responders were trying to attend to her injuries at the motel, but before she did, she was able to identify the person who attacked her. Roslin was able to tell first responders that her wife, Joyce Pelzer, is the person who did this to her. Now, immediately after this, Roslin was put into the ambulance and transported to the hospital, and while Roslin was on her way to the hospital, detectives and police officers stayed back at the hotel to speak with the hotel manager and also speak with the other guests who were staying at the hotel to see if they could kind of piece together what exactly happened here. Now, according to the hotel manager, he claimed that he was told from a maintenance worker shortly before he called 911 that there was a fight that had broken out in one of the hotel rooms. This maintenance worker claimed that he walked by the room and heard screaming coming from inside, and shortly after the screaming, he saw a woman open the door, close it behind her, and walk towards the parking lot. And that woman was believed to be Joyce. Now, the maintenance worker pointed out that Joyce was not wearing any shoes. She was actually only wearing socks when she left the hotel room. And this was consistent to detectives' findings because they discovered a trail of bloody sock prints from that motel room that Joyce and Roslin were in all the way to the parking lot. Now, there were also other witnesses who saw Joyce walking to the parking lot who claimed that, again, she was wearing the bloody socks and she also had blood all over her hands. Witnesses claimed that they saw Joyce walking in a brisk but calm manner. Her pace definitely seemed like she was trying to get out of there quickly. However, she didn't seem frantic and she had an eerily calm aura to her. Witnesses then described that they saw Joyce get into a dark colored vehicle with an out-of-state license plate. Now, when looking at hotel records, detectives were able to learn that the room that Joyce and Roslin were staying in was under Joyce's name, and she had been staying there for the past 3 nights. But at this point, no one knew where Joyce was. Joyce was officially on the run, her whereabouts were unknown, and police knew that they needed to find her quickly. Now, at this same time, though, Roslin was in the hospital fighting for her life. Roslin had suffered from 34 stab wounds all over her stomach, her back, and her neck. And while she was at the hospital, she unfortunately succumbed to her injuries and passed away. So now, at this point, this case has officially moved from an attempted homicide case to a full-on homicide investigation. And like I said, Joyce, their prime suspect, is on the run. Police at this point are calling around to surrounding counties to let them know to be on the lookout for Joyce. And this is when they learned something that completely changed the entire trajectory of this case. While the detectives from Roslin's case were on the phone with detectives from DeKalb County, Georgia, this is when they learned that Joyce was also a prime suspect in a different missing persons case in DeKalb County from 7 years prior. And the woman who went missing was Joyce's ex-girlfriend named Shondelle McLeod. 35-year-old Shondelle McLeod was reported missing on September 25th, 2011, after her mother called in to report that her daughter did not show up for work that day and also missed their scheduled family dinner that night. Shondelle was incredibly family-oriented. Her family grew up in New York and then moved to Georgia after her childhood. And when detectives spoke with Shondelle's mother, not only was she hysterical, saying that something had to have been wrong because this behavior was very much unlike Shondelle, but she also disclosed to authorities that Shondelle had recently gotten out of an abusive relationship with her ex-girlfriend, Joyce Pelzer. Now, Joyce and Shondelle met at Shondelle's job. She worked at the Life Care Center nursing home, and she worked there as a chef. So Shondelle and Joyce met at the Life Care Center, and when they did, they started out simply as just friends. However, over time, that friendship evolved into a full-on romantic relationship. Now, Shondelle's mom told authorities that Joyce from the get-go was incredibly controlling. She was controlling over who Shondelle spent her time with, and over time, that controlling, manipulative behavior escalated to verbal and physical abuse. Shondelle also confided in her mom during the time that she was dating Joyce that Joyce had actually been cheating on her with multiple different women at the end of their relationship. And one of those women that Joyce was cheating on Shondelle with was Roslin. Now, when Shondelle found out about Roslin, this really was the last straw for her, and she ended up breaking off the relationship with Joyce and kicking Joyce out of the house that they both lived in. But Joyce was not giving up on their relationship that easily. Right after Shondelle ended the relationship, Joyce began stalking Shondelle, calling Shondelle's friends and begging her friends to convince Shondelle to get back together with Joyce. And when that didn't work, Joyce actually broke into Shondelle's home and stole quite literally everything from the home. I'm talking the furniture, I'm talking the curtains. It was even said that Joyce took the toilet seats out of the home. And as devastating as this was for Shondelle, she really just tried her best to move forward with her life. She felt at this point, Joyce couldn't take anything else from her. She took everything in the house. All Shondelle wanted to do was move forward and move on. However, unfortunately, that was not the end of it, because only a month later, Shondelle was woken up in the middle of the night to find Joyce standing in her bedroom with a knife in her hand. Now, somehow, and I wasn't able to completely figure out how she did this, but somehow Shondelle was able to talk Joyce down that night and get her to leave the home. And Joyce did leave that night. And the following day, Shondelle went straight to the courts to get a protective order against Joyce. But 2 months later, Shondelle was missing. Okay, you guys, let's talk all about June's Journey. If you don't know, June's Journey is a hidden object mystery game that immerses you in a captivating detective story set amongst the glamorous backdrop of the 1920s. With a diverse set of characters, each scene unfolds a gripping murder mystery as the protagonist, June Parker, embarks on a quest to solve her sister's murder and uncover her family's long-buried secrets. The game is always full of activity. Progress through the story to unlock new chapters or participate in events to win exciting in-game rewards. This is a free-to-download mobile game that challenges you to locate hidden objects in stunningly detailed, vibrant scenes. I know everyone here loves true crime as much as I do, and because of that, I know you guys are going to love June's Journey. So join me as we embark on solving June's Journey one level at a time by clicking the link in the description box or scanning the QR code on the screen to download the game directly onto your phone. One of my New Year's resolutions is to eat more intentionally. I want to plan out my meals and feel confident about the food I'm putting into my body. But honestly, that can get pretty overwhelming sometimes. With so many options out there, I oftentimes find myself resorting back to old habits just because it's easier. But luckily, that all changed thanks to Hungry Root. Hungry Root makes meal planning and eating healthy effortless by acting like your own personal nutritionist. They recommend delicious recipes tailored to your taste, dietary needs, and health goals. Whether you're looking for anti-inflammatory, gut-friendly, gluten-free, dairy-free, or high-protein options, Hungry Root has it all. Simply share your preferences and they'll fill your cart with personalized selections that get smarter as they learn what you love. Their food contains no high-fructose corn syrup, artificial sweeteners, or preservatives, and they only source top-quality hormone and antibiotic-free meat and seafood. Plus, with recipes that take 15 minutes or less to prepare and over 15,000 options shipped weekly, Hungry Root offers something for every lifestyle and flavor preference, making it easier than ever to enjoy nutritious, high-quality meals without the stress. I get so excited every time I get my Hungry Root box because not only are they taking away so much time of me having to plan out my meals, but they also know things that I would like before I even do. I get so excited going through all of their selections and know that I'm getting the highest quality of what they're sending. You're going to love Hungry Root as much as I do. Take advantage of this exclusive offer. For a limited time, get 40% off your first box, plus get a free item in each box for life. Go to hungryroot.com/killer and use code KILLER. That's hungryroot.com/killer. Use code KILLER to get 40% off your first box and a free item of your choice for life. hungryroot.com/killer, code KILLER. Now, the detectives in Roslin's case also learned from the DeKalb County Police that shortly after this missing persons report for Shondelle was filed, police had Joyce come down to the station to answer some questions regarding her disappearance. And when Joyce did, Joyce was not alone. She actually brought Roslin with her. Now, initially, when sitting down with authorities, Joyce explained her relationship with Shondelle. Now, this was a one-on-one conversation between Joyce and the detective. And Joyce went on to say that she and Shondelle dated for several years, and just like any other couple, the two had their disagreements, they had their arguments, but it never was violent and never got out of control. She actually said that the night that Shondelle went missing, she was home all weekend with her new girlfriend, Roslin. So Roslin at this point was also questioned because now Roslin is included in the alibi that Joyce is giving. So Roslin sat down separately with authorities as well, and Roslin confirmed that she was with Joyce all weekend on the weekend of September 25th. So she was with her Saturday the 24th as well as Sunday the 25th. However, there was one difference in Roslin and Joyce's stories, and that was that Joyce had indicated to police that on Monday, September 26th, that she went to work that day. Joyce said that this was a typical day for her. She woke up and she went to work and then came home. It was a normal day. But Roslin, on the other hand, said something very different. Roslin told authorities that on September 26th, her and Joyce stayed home all day. She didn't mention anything about Joyce going to work, Joyce having a shift that day. She actually said that it was just one of those days where you don't really want to do anything and you just want to chill out, hang out, and that's exactly what they did. Now, obviously, these are two very different stories, and the only person that was able to confirm this story or not was Joyce's employer. So the detectives called Joyce's work to confirm whether or not she was at work on Monday, and that is when her employer told authorities that Joyce, in fact, did not make it to her shift on Monday. So she completely lied to authorities about that. Along with this, detectives pulled Joyce's cell phone records and saw that not only was she lying about where she was on Monday the 26th, but Joyce was lying about where she was the entire weekend. On Saturday the 24th and Sunday the 25th, Joyce was pretty much everywhere but home. Her phone was pinging all around town. She was not at her house like she claimed that she was. Now, with these findings, police are able to obtain a search warrant for Shondelle's home. They did this because they wanted to see if there was any evidence that they could find inside of the home that could potentially help piece together what happened here. They wanted to see if they could find any evidence, any sign of the struggle, or really see if there was anything that was able to confirm that if something happened to Shondelle, if it happened in her home. Now, when they got to Shondelle's home, they realized that there was nothing that looked out of the ordinary. There was nothing that looked out of place, but there were a couple findings that they did notice. Now, the first thing that authorities found when looking in Shondelle's bedroom was a man's watch on the floor. So they first find a man's watch. They then move their way into Shondelle's bathroom, and they notice that there were 2 shot glasses in the bathroom by the sink. Along with that, they also discovered an ashtray with cigarettes in it. And this made police question if there was other company that Shondelle had over the night that she went missing. And it really made them question if there was another potential suspect that they needed to be looking into, because clearly someone else was here. So at this point, police talked to some of Shondelle's coworkers and her friends. And this is when they learned that at Shondelle's job, there was a food delivery driver who worked at the same life care center that Shondelle did, and that his name was Rico. Now, according to her family and friends, Shondelle and Rico got along very well, and they spent a lot of time together. But there was one issue pertaining to Rico, and that was the fact that Rico was married. Rico was married with kids, and it is a little bit unclear how much Shondelle knew about Rico's family life, about his relationship status. We don't know any of that. And Rico stated from the beginning that even though he was not going to leave his wife and his family, he had no intention of ever actually separating from his wife. He claimed he still wanted to explore a physical sexual relationship with Shondelle, and that is exactly what they did. Rico ended up sitting down with authorities to talk about his relationship with Shondelle, and he confirmed that on the night of September 24th, he was with Shondelle at her home. He confirmed that the watch was his. He confirmed that they had drinks together. He confirmed that he smoked and the cigarettes in the ashtray were his. And he said that on the night of the 24th, he actually took a little bit of a nap later on in the night to sleep off the alcohol. He then said that he woke up around midnight and realized that it was midnight and quickly got his things together and rushed out the door to go back home. And that is why he left his watch on the ground, because he was in such a rush. Now, detectives did have to confirm this alibi with Rico's wife, which, as you can imagine, was a very uncomfortable call to make. And even though she was incredibly distraught after finding out this news of her husband's infidelity, she did confirm Rico's story and his timeline. Now, along with all of this, Rico also told authorities that he knew all about Joyce Pelzer. He said that Shondelle was absolutely terrified of Joyce, so much so that Shondelle asked Rico to keep a pair of boots outside of her front door to make it seem like there was always a man home and that Shondelle was never alone. And Rico said that she specifically asked this because Joyce would spend her time driving past Shondelle's house several times a day, and it made Joyce, as you can imagine, extremely uncomfortable. Now, at this point, police look into Shondelle's credit card statements because they're trying to piece together what happened leading up to her exact disappearance. We know that the last known person to see Shondelle was Rico, because Rico claims that he left Shondelle's residence around midnight on the 24th. Now, police, when looking into her credit card, they were able to see that on September 25th, Shondelle had gotten gas at the local gas station close to her work. Now, if you remember earlier, I stated that Shondelle missed her shift at work that day on the 25th. She was scheduled to go into work and she never made it. So at this point, police went to that same gas station that the credit card transaction was made from, and they looked at the security footage, and they were able to confirm that on the morning of September 25th, Shondelle was seen at this gas station getting gas. She seemed completely fine. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. She didn't seem nervous or scared or disheveled. And then she got back into her car and drove to the direction of her work. However, we know she never made it there. So whatever happened to Shondelle happened sometime between her getting gas and her driving to her shift at work. Now, at this point, the lead detective on Shondelle's case, named Detective Guest, he tried to get warrants on both Roslin and Joyce because he was confident that they knew way more than they were letting on. However, the DA would not approve of these warrants because the DA said that there was not enough evidence that pointed to Roslin and Joyce. So because of this, the case went cold for those 7 years until the detectives for Roslin's case called the DeKalb County detectives. Now, after Detective Guest, who again was the lead detective on Shondelle's case, heard about Roslin's murder, he took it upon himself to learn more about Roslin and Joyce's relationship. He started talking to Roslin's friends and family, and this is when he learned that the relationship between Roslin and Joyce was very similar to the relationship between Shondelle and Joyce. Friends of Roslin said that she had confided in them about how the relationship was very toxic. They were consistently arguing. But not only that, Roslin had confided in them that Joyce had been having multiple affairs throughout their marriage. Roslin had specifically learned that Joyce had been cheating on her with a woman named Katie, who lived in Clearwater, Florida. Now, when detectives were given Katie's information, they were able to track her down and they were able to give her a phone call. And when detectives called Katie, she answered the phone. And the first thing she told Detective Guest was, "I've been waiting for you to call me." Katie went on to tell Detective Guest that a year prior to Roslin's murder, Joyce had confided and confessed to her that she had killed a previous ex-girlfriend of hers named Shondelle. Joyce went on to say that she was telling Katie this because she felt comfortable around Katie, but also because she wanted Katie to know the type of person that she was dealing with. Katie said that when Joyce told her this, it took her aback, and she asked Joyce what she meant by that statement. And that is when Joyce responded by saying, "I'm not a good person, Katie." After this, Katie began recording her and Joyce's phone conversations and their phone calls because Katie said that she was fearful of Joyce. And in these conversations, Joyce again admitted and confessed to killing Shondelle. Not only did Joyce confess to the murder, but she also stated that she was going to frame Roslin for the murder of Shondelle. She had told Katie that she was worried that Roslin was going to turn on her and go to the authorities and tell authorities that Joyce had murdered Shondelle. So Joyce essentially thought that she was going to beat Roslin to the punch and tell authorities herself, but blame the murder on Roslin. Joyce went on to tell Katie that her and Roslin were fighting consistently and that they were on the verge of ending their marriage. And detectives also learned through talking to Katie and looking at phone records that Roslin had agreed to meet with Joyce in that hotel room on December 10th with the intention of ending their marriage. Roslin was going to end the marriage with Joyce in that hotel room. They had been talking back and forth leading up to this point, and Joyce went into this meeting thinking that there was some chance of reconciliation, but when she learned that Roslin actually wanted to file for divorce, that is when Joyce snapped. Police felt that the motive for Roslin's murder was a combination of if I can't have you, no one can, that kind of mentality, and also out of fear that if Roslin and Joyce were no longer together, then at that point, Roslin didn't need to feel any sort of loyalty towards Joyce, and maybe she would be more compelled to go to police and turn Joyce in for Shondelle's murder. So with all of this information, everything that police are learning, they know that they need to track down Joyce. And mind you, they learn all of this information over the course of 3 days. It took them 3 days after Roslin's murder to learn all of this information. And when they looked into Joyce's cell phone and pinged Joyce's phone, they discovered that Joyce's phone was traveling to Florida. They learned that Joyce's phone, and by association, Joyce herself, was making her way to Florida. Now, police also knew, like I said earlier, that Katie at the time, she also lived in Florida, and detectives were worried that Joyce was on her way to Florida to potentially harm Katie as well. So at this point, detectives made all other police in the surrounding areas from where Joyce's cell phone was pinged aware to be on the lookout for Joyce and to apprehend her if she is discovered. And finally, several hours later, Joyce's car was spotted headed down the interstate, again, heading towards Florida. Now, when Joyce was spotted, police tried to initiate a traffic stop. However, instead of stopping, Joyce actually sped up and tried to flee from authorities. So instead, police used a tactic where they tipped the back end of Joyce's car with their own, causing Joyce to spin out and stop. At this point, the cops got out of their car and pointed their guns towards Joyce, telling her to get out of the vehicle, but instead, Joyce raised her own gun up into the air, causing officers to shoot inside of Joyce's car. Now, surprisingly, Joyce suffered no significant injuries or trauma from the shooting, and she was transported to the hospital just to get assessed. And after that assessment, she was transported to the Rockdale County Jail. Police took a look inside of Joyce's car after she had been put into the ambulance and transported to the hospital, and that is when they discovered Joyce's bloody clothing, as well as the knife that was used in Roslin's death. Now, while in prison, Joyce really surprised everyone by pleading guilty to Roslin's death. She was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole because of her confession. But when it pertained to Shondelle's case, this went very differently. Joyce spent an hour and a half talking to Detective Guest, who again was the lead detective on Shondelle's case. And in this conversation, Joyce admitted that while she was in fact there when Shondelle was killed, she was adamant that she was not the one who killed her. Joyce completely put the blame of Shondelle's death onto Roslin, saying that Roslin was upset that Joyce had contracted herpes from Shondelle, which then got transmitted to Roslin. Now again, there could be no basis or truth to any of that. We really do not know how accurate that is. And honestly, it does not matter either way. But that was the excuse that Joyce gave at the time. So Joyce went on to say that Roslin was upset about this, and so as a result, Roslin hired several men to drug Shondelle, drive her out to the Arabia Mountain Park, and bury her body out there. But again, authorities knew that Joyce was lying. Katie had a recorded phone call of Joyce admitting that she was going to make up that exact story and put the blame on Roslin. So police did not believe her for a single second. Now, all in all, Joyce was charged with Shondelle's death, but she pled not guilty. The case went to trial, and the defense argued that because there was no body, there wasn't enough evidence to prove that Joyce was guilty for this. Prosecution brought in Katie Long to testify against Joyce, and with this, the prosecution brought in their star witness in the trial, which was Katie, and she testified against Joyce. And with this, Joyce was convicted of Shondelle's murder as well, and she was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for Shondelle's murder. I do want to mention that unfortunately, Shondelle's remains have never been recovered. Police did do an extensive search of the Arabia Mountain Park where Joyce had claimed that her remains were buried. They brought in cadaver dogs. They did an extensive search in 2019. However, her remains were never recovered. And with that being said, you guys, that is this case. That is the case of Roslin Lewis. It's the case of Shondelle McLeod, and it's the case of Joyce Pelzer. Truthfully, I think that this is a mind-blowing case, and it really baffles me that Joyce was able to get away with what she was doing for so long. I think that the signs were clear as day that Joyce had some sort of connection to Shondelle's murder, and I think it's absolutely wild that was not looked into more. Again, not at any fault of the detectives themselves, because they were trying to push this case along, but again, there was just not enough evidence to get the warrants for Joyce and Roslin. And I also wonder what you guys are going to say in regards to Roslin's involvement in all of this. Do you believe that she was there when Shondelle was murdered? Do you believe that she knew that Joyce was involved? Do you think that she had equal involvement in it? I'm just very curious to hear what you guys have to say about this case. But with that being said, you guys, again, that is all for me today. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Killer Instinct. Again, if you're new here, hi, my name is Savannah. I'm your host of Killer Instinct. Before you leave, make sure you go ahead and hit that subscribe button. That way you never miss an episode. We post weekly here on the podcast every single Wednesday. You guys are not going to want to miss it. I'll be back next week with a brand new one for you guys. And until then, stay safe. Bye, guys.